Hello, my name is Antonio Isa Ruben Espinoza. I'm from Seattle, Washington, in the U.S. I recently became a Muslim. I would say not recently, but maybe a year and a half ago, my official Shahada. However, I took a Shahada about 2 years ago in the U.S. Becoming a Muslim, growing up, I didn't know of any Muslims. I didn't know of anyone from my friends or anyone just that I worked with or anyone that I went to school with who were Muslims. However, in school, I learned a little bit about Islam and about Muslim religion. And while I didn't know too much about it, I didn't necessarily have anything against it, neither necessarily anything for it. However, I ended up going to school, university, and my roommate at the time, one of my roommates at the time, he was a Muslim. His name was Muhammad. I noticed every day he would pray 5 times a day. He would always do this washing technique that I always thought was interesting. He always did a bunch of things that were just different from my way of life and how I did kind of my things. Not that I had any problems with it, but I just noticed it and kept an eye and I observed it and just thought it was interesting. At one point in time, there was a discussion in my class, in the health major, about fasting, and he actually had all this information, knew all this knowledge. And so after the class, I asked him, how did you get all this knowledge? Where do you, how did this just come randomly out of the air? How do you know so much about fasting? He's like, well, actually, as a Muslim, we fast every year for a certain amount of days, and that it's a good thing to fast. So I asked him why. He explained to me why. I asked him more questions about Islam because he related it to Islam and about Muslim religion, and that's when I began to become interested. I did a little bit more of my own research, went into depth with it, and realized how much Islam was teaching me when I was just simply looking up things, how much has been revealed so many years ago, 1400 years ago, over 1400 years ago, and how much has just been revealed through the Quran. And that's at that point in time I started looking at the Quran and reading a little bit of the Quran. Again, at this point, I wasn't necessarily a Muslim. I was just still reading and trying to find out as much information as I could. However, there was a point in time where I just kind of thought to myself, all right, this is really interesting. How come not other people know about this? And like I said, in my research, that's when I just came to the point where I feel like this is the right religion. So I asked him more about it. Asked him, how do I become a Muslim? Is there like a ritual I have to do? Is there like a dunking in water I have to do? Is there anything I need to do to become a Muslim? And he just told me I need to say a couple words. So after saying my Shahada verbally with him, I was essentially a Muslim. He helped me practice with him. I would practice with him on small things, praying every day, getting used to it. In that point in time, it's basically the end of my school, and I was choosing of where to choose a job, where to work, and Bahrain was a selection of me where I could go and work. I thought that'd be really interesting to go to an Islamic country to go and work, like I said, in an Islamic country. So I told myself, why not? It gives me an opportunity to learn a little bit more about Islam and plus give me an opportunity to travel to good destinations. Not a lot of people say they've been to Bahrain. I didn't even know what Bahrain was. I didn't even know it was a place in the world before I came here. Upon arriving here, that's where I really took initiative to trying to understand Islam and understand what my faith that I'm practicing and where it's going to go and bring me in life. There's a lot of people and things that have brought me close to Islam. Very, very thankful for them. And that's why I am here today, continuously practicing this month of Ramadan, and enjoying every last minute of it. And that's where I am today, giving this interview right now. The biggest changes I would say Islam has brought to my life is just my perspective on the world and how I look at people and just other things. Growing up, I was like in a poor situation with my family, and I was growing up always saying, I need to make sure I get a good job, have a nice car, have a nice house, all this stuff that I didn't get to have. And now it's funny, I'm at the point where even if I want those things or I could have those things, it's not something I'm necessarily reaching out for. And it's not the same things I would want, I'd say. I'm looking at people differently, looking at the people who are less fortunate at a different way, looking at people who are more fortunate in a different way, and looking at how people are actually in those situations and how they're reflecting on their life and how they're deen, and just looking at the world in a totally different way. The things that Islam has taught me and the things I've learned just by reading the Quran, it's really interesting just how it's changed my perspective on life. Actually, I'll talk about my family first, but, for my family, it was a bit, I don't want to say harder, but it was a bit different approach opposed to my friends. For my family, and first of all, I'm not necessarily the closest to my family. However, it was still something that I'm like, okay, eventually I'm going to have to tell them. It's not like I can't ever tell them. But I actually went to almost a span of 6 months where I didn't tell them just because I wasn't sure how they accept it. Not that I wasn't proud of my religion or I wasn't ashamed or anything like that, but I was just, it's different to go from one religion, your whole family and everyone you know, and then you at that one point are the one who's converting. And it was just a different approach it was basically me just trying to understand how am I going to tell them? How am I going to approach them about this? And at the same time, I was still in that point where I didn't know as much as I wanted to and approach them yet. So I knew that I tell them, by the way, I've converted to become a Muslim, they would question it, right? And I just wanted to be at a point in my faith and my deen where I knew enough information where I could back up why I'm doing this. So that way it doesn't look like I'm just doing it for any reason. So once to the point I felt like I knew enough knowledge, basic knowledge and understanding of Islam, that's when I told my family. However, for my friends, it was a different story. It was kind of almost an instant thing, probably the same week or the week of, where I told my friends actually, by the way, I've converted to Islam. They all took it, kind of like a normal thing. They were like, okay, I understand that. Okay, well, that's cool. I think at first they didn't really understand that I'm like, oh, he's really serious about this. It's probably just a thing. But as time's gone, they've all seen and they've respected it and appreciate what Islam has showed them as well. The biggest thing I would say for people from where I'm from in my country, in the US, or just from people in general, is just have an open mindset. I know a lot of people, when you're trying to not necessarily influence them, but have them understand Islam, it's kind of hard because media nowadays and how political it can be about with Islam, it can give a really bad or wrong perception of what Islam is. The extremists and all these things that show what not Islam is always what's portrayed. However, the genuine things of what's going on, is never what's unfortunately portrayed. And I just think that, because for me it took almost a time span of 9 months from converting to Christianity to Islam. And I feel like if I had a better mindset or a more open mindset, I definitely would have cut that time in half or down to a quarter of that time at least. Just having a more open mindset is by far the biggest thing I'd say. Just being able to embrace Islam and just making sure that things are portrayed, like I said, on social media shouldn't be your conception. Simply open up a Quran and reading Quran, you can understand that that's not what Islam is. So that's what I have to say to them.